The stories you've heard and the ones you need to hear.
Article of impeachment.
They delivered the articles.
This proceeding violates the Constitution and is not in order.
Told you so.
The theory that the impeachment of a former official is unconstitutional is flat out wrong.
Told you so.
Take the vaccine when it is your turn. Vaccinating as many people as possible.
The brutal truth is, it's going to take months
for us to return of a sense of normalcy.
Your life, your values, your voice. This is News and Views with Tom Lamprecht on Talk 96.3 and 103.7.
All right, welcome in. It is News and Views and lots to talk about. Are we good? A winter weather advisory is in effect from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Evening rain will likely mix and change to snow between 2 and 4 a.m. So in our area, we'll probably see 1 to 2 inches, depending on where you are. A vote on a controversial change to North Carolina's social studies standards by the Board of Education has been scheduled for the same time that the Senate is set to convene, creating a conflict of interest for Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, who presides over the Senate and is a voting member of the board. Mark Robinson said, "Our office tried to coordinate with the state board to find a time that was agreeable, but we were stonewalled," Robinson told the North State Journal in a January 25th email. Apparently we're having some sound issues, so we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and get this straightened out. We'll be, stay with us. We're going to take a break. We'll get it straightened out and come right back to you.
Back to News and Views. Talk 96.3 and 103.7.
All right, let's try this again. Yeah, that's better. That's a little bit better. All right, yeah. My producer says it feels better. Anyway, when we started the program, we had a little bit of a sound issue, mic issue. We got that fixed. Thank you, Clark, for fixing that. We were talking about the fact that there is some controversial changes coming to North Carolina's public education social studies standards, starting all the way down in kindergarten. We're talking about bringing in such things as systemic racism into the curriculum, intersectionality, critical race theory, pro-LGBTQ propaganda, social justice, social engineering. One of the persons that actually serves on the board, one of the members on the board, is the Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. And interestingly, he and his staff have trying to work things out so that he could be at this upcoming meeting where curriculum is going to be discussed. The North State Journal has reported that he can't get into the meeting because he also has duties over at the Senate. They've been trying to rearrange the meeting, but he feels like he's being stonewalled. On the phone with us right now is the Lieutenant Governor. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. As you explain to our audience exactly what your thoughts are concerning this new curriculum that we've talked about this before in our program, but the new curriculum that's coming up, and why exactly do you feel like you're being stonewalled? You're being blocked out of this meeting.
Well, let's be, put this in perspective. What happened is, and the thing that dismayed me is, I have made it known that these standards are something that I stand against. The very first school board meeting, I made comments that made that perfectly plain, that it was something I was very passionate about and was very much against. After that meeting, we had our opening session in the Senate that I presided over, and at the end, we announced that we would be back in session on today at 12 o'clock.
Right.
There was an announcement made that we would have a meeting, not a vote, but a meeting about these standards. And I was dismayed to find out that meeting was set up 45 minutes before I was supposed to be presiding over the Senate today.
Unbelievable.
I don't attribute that to anybody necessarily trying to do anything nefarious, but it's awful coincidental. And I just think it smacks of a larger problem that we have in government when it comes to coordinating our efforts in government to make sure that every member of every board, their schedules are satisfied. And with being the Lieutenant Governor and being the person that presides over the Senate, I certainly think that should have been taken into consideration for this meeting, but it was not. And quite frankly, I'm dismayed by that fact.
Well, yeah, you've got the biggest bully pulpit of anyone up there, perhaps other than the superintendent. But yeah, you've got a pretty strong voice.
Absolutely. And I can't help but feel, as the young people say, can't help but feel some kind of way about it.
Yeah.
To be quite honest. Now, when we're talking about the actual issue that we're talking about, what we are actually talking about is not the curriculum per se; it is the standard that the state school board is working on to present the teachers to, I suppose, to create the curriculum. And the problem with the standards, and we don't have time to go over them in their entirety, but I encourage anyone out there to please look these standards up from K through 12. They are very, very left-leaning. I mean, they're leaning towards that whole anti-American, anti-Constitution, anti-founding document, founding fathers sentiment that we see all too often in education out of those on the left. And I do not like them. I do not think that they are appropriate for our students. And quite frankly, they were done with the intention of what they tell us to include, to be inclusive. But I keep reiterating the fact that as a 52-year-old man, there was no time at any point when I was in public school that any individual, any entity was omitted from our studies in social studies or history. We learned about African Americans, we learned about Native Americans, we learned about women, we learned about our founding fathers, we learned all those things. So when you read these standards in their totality, they smack of leftist dogma, and that is the issue that I have with them. They have a horrible tone. They're, quite frankly, useless. They don't do anything our teachers have not already been doing. And in many cases, they're age appropriate. There's no reason to be trying to teach a second grader that we're having trouble teaching to read on a second grade level difficult subjects and situations like issues about race and gender. We need to focus on those 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. So those are my points and my comments in the meeting today, and I made that quite plain.
So were you able to join the meeting at some point today?
I was. The President Pro Tem was able to preside over the Senate today while I fulfilled my duties on the state school board. And I was able to attend the meeting, voice my opinion. And I had several people in the meeting along with me that are equally dismayed over the formation of these, over how these standards are written. We had a wonderful set of standards that were in place and ready to be passed, and they have been replaced with something that is completely unacceptable.
Where do you think this is going to go, Lieutenant Governor?
Ultimately, I really believe that what these standards are setting the stage for is to introduce leftist dogma into the classroom. These standards are full of political jargon, a lot of leftist jargon that is meant to encourage, or not just, maybe not encourage, but to segue right into the whole thing that we see, the whole anti-American sentiment that we see coming out of groups like Black Lives Matter and other organizations, that America is a systemically racist place. And as I stated in the meeting today, that is blatantly not true.
Yeah.
Our founding documents are the reason why this country was able to throw off the yoke of slavery, throw off the yoke of Jim Crow, and continues to be the freest and most prosperous place on earth. Do we need to teach our complete history? Yes, warts and all, but we don't need to do it from a perspective that teaches our students to hate our founding documents, and hate who we are.
When will this curriculum change, if it does change? When will this come up for a vote?
It's coming up for a vote, I believe, on February 3rd. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but my position is going to continue to be to stand strong against these standards because, again, I don't believe they're what our students need. Our students need teachers to come into a classroom as blank slate, intending to teach what happened, and letting students go by the same thing I said on the campaign trail. Teach children how to think,
right?
Not
what to think. Well said. As you do a head count, is it a pretty split vote down the middle?
It is split right down the line. We heard some great arguments today. I appreciate, of course, the sentiments that came from the other side of the aisle, so to speak. But again, my position on these standards has been made clear, and I'm going to stand strong and stand against them.
As you consider what our listeners might do, is there any sway? I mean, should they be contacting the State Board of Education and making their thoughts known, or is it pretty much a done deal?
Well, I'm not sure. We can't see into the future. I don't know what's going to happen. But, I think this can be a rallying cry for people to really, and I've been saying this for a long time, it is time for the average American citizen to get deeply involved in the political process, to take up the mantle that our founding fathers intended them to take up, to be the rightful masters of their destiny in this government, to get involved, to become aware, and do due diligence when it comes to things like this. Because if we don't get involved, if we don't pay attention, people will do nefarious things behind our backs, and oftentimes they will do it in the classroom where it will hurt us the most. So I would encourage all the people out there who are listening, if you have not read these standards and are not familiar with what I'm talking about, please go to the state school board website and look up these standards and find out what they're all about, and judge for yourself.
Will the teachers, if this were to pass, would the teachers be pretty much forced into having to teach this, or do they have some options or are they pretty much stuck if this passes?
The teachers will not be stuck in what they will teach. I think more what the problem would be is it would lead to a segue of what what could come into the classroom.
Right.
This anti-American sentiment that would come into the classroom from teachers who have less than honest motives. And I'm just going to be honest when I say that, because as a person who's very passionate about education, as a person who counts himself as a conservative and as a Republican, one of the things that I hope to be able to do before I leave this earth is teach at some point. Teach, whether it be at the college level or some level. And when I walk into the classroom as a teacher, I don't intend to walk in as a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or a conservative. I intend to walk in as a teacher who is ready to fill minds with information, not indoctrination.
Well, the truth of the truth of the matter is, teachers have a pretty good amount of leeway. I mean, if someone wants to go into their classroom and shut the door and propagate a certain agenda, now they might get caught and they might get in trouble for it, but there's a pretty good amount of leeway already there. And unfortunately, if you're leaning far to the left, this just sort of greases the skids for you to increase the amount of the propaganda and not have to be accountable for it.
Absolutely. That is the number one argument that I have against these standards. I have an argument with the state school board issuing standards, creating standards with this type of tone.
All right.
Our standards that we issue should not have this type of tone. They should not have this quasi-political social tone. They should be standards that set the stage for education.
Well, Mark, thank you for joining us, and boy, I would encourage our people to pray for you because you're wearing a pretty important mantle right now, and please continue to do what you're doing. And we would encourage our folks to go to the State Board of Education and contact the members there and let them know how you feel as this matter progresses. Again, as the Lieutenant Governor just told us, this will come up for a vote tentatively on February the 3rd, which is, next Wednesday.
Yes.
Mark, thank you for what you do. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me on. We look forward to coming back in the future.
We appreciate it. Mark Robinson calling in, and, boy, please do. I'll see if we can find that website, Clark, and put it up on our Facebook page and our website, newsandviewswithtom.com, so our folks can go to that and get that. We're going to take a time out. When we come back, Roy Cooper has made another announcement about COVID this afternoon. You're not going to like it. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Eastern Carolina's place to talk about
coronavirus. It's on the police.
Everything.
Give me liberty or give me COVID-19.
Right now, more news and views on Talk 96.3 and 103.7.
All right, welcome back in. 26 minutes past the top of the hour. Take a look at your weather forecast. Yes, there's a chance that we might get an inch or two of snow overnight. Chances are it will mostly stick to the grassy areas. Really depends on how cold it gets tonight. The low they're predicting is 32. Of course, you can have snow falling with a degree or two higher than that, but chances of it accumulating, obviously you need to get down to freezing. But the chance of precip tonight is 80%. Depending on where you are, you're going to see some white stuff when you wake up in the morning. Go out and get your bread and your milk. Children all over eastern North Carolina, now that we're back in school, they're praying that they have a day off. Maybe not. Maybe they're so tired of being out, they actually want to go back to school. Anyway, stay tuned. We'll see what happens. Roy Cooper announced today that the state's curfew will continue. Did you know there was a curfew? I mean, we announced it about a month ago. Executive Order 188, which was signed on January the 8th, expires this Friday, January the 29th. Today's order, Executive Order 189. I wonder, is this the 189th executive order since COVID started? Probably so. It means the restrictions will continue until February the 28th. Now, if you went out and asked people, okay, what are the restrictions? Do you think anybody would know what they are? I would say maybe 1 out of 100. It is a 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew. And again, it's an executive order. Now, I have been out past 10 o'clock several times. Now, look, I'm at the age where I look forward to going to bed at 9:30 at night. So that's not, it's not like I'm out partying at midnight. But did you know that you're not supposed to be out between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m.? Although there's all kinds of exceptions, worship services, spiritual gatherings, funeral ceremonies, wedding ceremonies, other activities. The order does not apply to retail businesses that sell groceries, medication, fuel, or health supplies. So if they pull you over and you say, well, I'm on the way to the grocery store. The order also continues to keep indoor rides, attractions closed, and non-bar night stops and arenas are restricted to 25 guests per facility. Mass gatherings limits remain unchanged, continuing at 10 individuals indoors, 50 outdoors. The prohibition on alcohol service for on-site consumption will continue to be in effect as well. So, in other words, if you're in that business, I hope you have deep pockets. Events outside the homes must also end no later than 10 p.m., including live entertainment, movie screenings, youth and amateur sporting events. However, professional and collegiate sporting events may continue after 10 p.m. Governor Cooper also announced he would extend the moratorium on evictions and his previous order regarding to-go alcohol beverages sales through March 31st. And again, as we've talked to some bar owners, this idea of to-go booze, that is so much, that is an accident ready to happen. The estimate number of patients presumed to be recovering from symptoms of COVID-19 is 635,543 across the state. Now, I wonder if you tested, I tested positive back at Thanksgiving, went through the quarantine. I could still test positive right now, right? I mean, I probably would. So would I be in that 635,000? I guess it's like if you're Cinderella, if you're out past 1 minute past 10, you turn into Anthony Fauci. So here's the thing. You can go to a sporting event, but we have to shut it down at 10 p.m. Otherwise, you might catch COVID. Before 10, you're fine. But after 10, you might catch COVID. I think it goes back to the authoritarianism. They want to tell you what to do. When they say jump, they want you to say how high on the way up. Yeah. So the Senate impeachment trial for former President Donald Trump is supposedly going to begin on February the 8th. it looks like we talked about the Rand Paul procedural vote, that this was unconstitutional, and Burr and Tillis voted not to end the debate on the Rand Paul procedural vote on the constitutionality of the whole impeachment. They voted in locks, they voted in agreement with what Rand Paul was doing. That is, they voted not to end the debate. Both Tillis and Burr came out with statements. I wouldn't say they were overly strong, but they made you think that they were against the impeachment. I have seen the letter, the form letter that Tom Tillis is sending out to people who have contacted his office, and it really reads like a politician's letter. I'll just leave it at that. A small group of protesters unfurled banners from the North Carolina House Chambers Visitors Gallery earlier today. The long fabric banners included messages in support of Medicaid expansion and spending the state's projected $4 billion in funding reserves, but the protesters were immediately escorted away by police. The protest occurred minutes before the House started its session, startled a few legislators. A Twitter account for the group called NC Team Democracy later tweeted a photo of the protesters with their banners. Quote, "The pandemic has affected our lives for nearly a year without action from the hashtag North Carolina General Assembly to protect our communities. People do not have secure housing, living wages, and access to health care," the tweet said, using the hashtag #ReleaseOurMoneyNC, which appears on one of the banners. Listen, I hear, the playing of the idea that people are hurting, and there is legislation being considered as we speak up in the North Carolina legislature to help out those businesses and individuals that are hurting. At the same time, there was a piece out just yesterday in the Carolina Journal, primarily focusing on North Carolina cities and how well they're doing as compared to the rest of the nation in terms of their solvency. But listen, I'd much rather be in the position we are in North Carolina with $4 billion in the bank than some of these other states that are so far underwater they can't see up. But here's the other thing. This will be framed as democracy in action by the mainstream media. These group of liberal protesters that went in demanding the release of these funds and the expansion of Medicaid. This will be talked about in the mainstream media. Oh, isn't that wonderful? These people are, they're going in and they're doing what they need to do to further democracy. What if this had been a group of conservatives demanding that the legislature lock down new laws to prevent future voter fraud? How would the mainstream media frame that? I can tell you exactly how they frame it. They would frame it as a mini riot that took place just like it happened January 6th up at the U.S. Capitol. It was the same thing that happened 10 years ago up in Madison, Wisconsin. We talked about that yesterday. When that happened, the mainstream media and liberals like Nancy Pelosi, that's exactly what she called it, democracy in action. And that's how this will be framed. It was reported in the News and Observer, pretty much as I just read it to you, that they were arrested. But there was no condemnation of it, that these people attempted to interrupt the legislature from doing their business. President Biden's climate advisor, Gina McCarthy, said earlier today that the administration is not asking for sacrifice with this executive order to shut down construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. According to the Keystone XL website, the project initially proposed more than a decade ago would have sustained about 11,000 U.S. jobs in 2021, including 8,000 union jobs, and generated $1.6 billion in gross wages. $1.6 billion, 11,000 jobs. The most exciting thing about this, McCarthy said during a Wednesday interview on NBC's Today Show, quote, "The president fully understands that people are suffering now, so this is all about recovering from the COVID crisis. This is all about building good, clean jobs where you can get access to jobs in good pay and unions." And John Kerry. John Kerry came out today. He is the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate. He came out and said that Joe Biden is doing what needs to be done to combat climate change, cracking down on the coal and oil and gas industries, he said. The crisis of the climate change underscored the need for investment in clean energy sectors, that workers in fossil fuel industries have been fed a false narrative about the future of their industries. At a press conference, a reporter asked Kerry what his message is to fossil fuel industry workers worried about losing their livelihoods as the Biden administration cracks down on their industries, and if the Biden administration is putting fossil fuel executives on notice with recent aggressive policies to tamp down fossil fuel production. Quote, "We didn't come here to put anybody on notice except to the seriousness of President Biden's intent to do what needs to be done to deal with this crisis." What crisis? What crisis? There is no crisis. The crisis is about to start because you're putting people out of work. That's the crisis. And this is the same tired BS that we heard from the Obama administration. And I mean, they said that same garbage. Oh, we're going to create millions of new clean energy jobs. Where are they? How many millions of dollars, was it $600 million we spent on Solyndra? And it didn't last a year. Same garbage that we heard from them 8 years ago, 12 years ago, and now we're hearing it again. Oh, we're going to have all kinds of clean energy jobs. Don't worry. Where did Obama's clean energy policy get us? It got us a lot of debt, no jobs. Under Obama, where did we say, how high did the unemployment go? 8%, 9%? And, under Trump, before COVID, there was a employee shortage. Companies couldn't find good people. Gina McCarthy continued, "This is all about investing in the infrastructure we need to build. The future is going to let us have clean energy and net zero in 2050. This is about promises he made and he's going to keep." Biden came out today and said, I'm not going to stop fracking. How long do you think that's going to last? Biden's $2 trillion clean energy infrastructure plan, with its goal of reaching net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest, aims to create millions of good-paying jobs that provide workers with the choice to join a union and bargain collectively with their employers. Look, these unions, you better wake up and smell the coffee. You're getting nothing with Joe Biden except the loss of jobs. How far will the Biden administration continue to push this? They're going to continue to push until there's some pushback, I can tell you that. Joe Biden signed an executive order today that banned the term China virus. Isn't that nice? That'll help the pandemic. Oh, we'll do that and hey, everything's wonderful. The coronavirus is widely believed to have been created in a lab in China, Wuhan, China. This is one of his 37 executive orders in just 6 days. 37 in 6 days. A dictator signs 37 in 6 days, not a president. CBS reported the Biden executive order is also expected to direct federal agencies like the Department of Health and Human Services to examine whether there are xenophobic references like China virus in any existing policies, directives, or government websites published by the Trump administration. By the way, Biden is not on the happy list with the American voter. President Biden has signed, as I said, 37 in 6 days, executive orders. His rhetoric and priorities aren't resonating with voters. And the polling says so. Well, and listen, this is polling with a media that is just kissing Joe Biden's skinny little butt. While much of what he has done was entirely predictable, some groups like labor unions still seem astonished. Yeah. Why would the pipe fitters union endorse Joe Biden? How can you be that stupid that you didn't see this coming? Biden's first daily presidential tracking poll put him into negative approval territory at -2. It's gotten worse. On Monday, dropped to -4. Tuesday, moved down to -5. This is interesting because, again, think about the fact that the media is just fawning all over Joe Biden. Donald Trump started at +2. First day, +2. He rose to +13. And that was with the media on the day he was inaugurated. The Washington Post ran a story about when are we going to impeach this guy. Biden has received very little negative coverage, with much of the corporate media applauding his early moves. However, even groups that have endorsed him have indicated they're disappointed in his energy policy decisions and the executive order on gender identity. This has not stopped the flurry of executive actions, though. Yesterday was Equity Day, and President Biden signed additional deeply unpopular orders. The implementation of Biden's immigration order was halted, now thanks to the lawsuit from the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Before the inauguration, caravans began to form in Central America. Yeah, do we want to see that again? Do we want to go back to that, where we had 8 years of this parade of illegal immigrants, gang members, people with all kinds of diseases, and people that now will bring in COVID? And again, this is so predictable. And the people act surprised. Biden rolled back the ban on critical race theory training, referring to it as diversity and sensitivity training. This characterization is misleading. The training divides people into oppressor groups and oppressed groups based on immutable characteristics such as race or gender, critical race theory. As City Journal writer Christopher Rufo has documented, many of these programs are reminiscent of struggle sessions in authoritarian regimes. In addition, Biden disbanded the 1776 Commission aimed at putting more patriotic content into America's classrooms. According to Rasmussen, at the time of the President Trump's Mount Rushmore speech, 57 people of likely voters agreed with this statement that he made. Quote, "The only path to unity is to rebuild shared national identity focused on common American values and virtues, of which we have plenty. This includes restoring patriotic education in our nation's schools while they are trying to change everything that we have learned." Likely voters also agreed with the following statement by Trump. 3 out of 4 agreed with this statement. "Together, we are part of one of the greatest stories ever told, the story of America. It is the epic tale of a great nation whose people have risked everything for what they know is right." Just like when we were talking to Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, this new curriculum that is being proposed into our public school systems, it's to divide us, not to unite us. President Unity, Joe Biden, has a much darker view of the nation. He seems to be moving back to the highly criticized 1619 Project. In his remarks yesterday on Equity Day, he characterized America as systemically racist, painting a very gloomy picture. Systemic racism has plagued our nation for far, far too long. I mean, do you really think we have systemic racism? That we have a system of racism? I mean, it's beyond the pale. The authors of this article out of PJ Media go on to say that Biden's handlers' failure to slow the roll of these policies is another sign that Democrats believe there is a majority support for a profoundly progressive policy agenda. You know, I disagree with that statement. I mean, the overall article is great, but that closing statement I have to disagree with. I think they're pushing their leftist agenda hard for the opposite reason. I think they know that the vast majority of Americans disagree with their ideology, and they're jamming it through as fast as they possibly can. And this idea of unity is a joke. It is a total joke. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's like believing that Planned Parenthood is really about women's health. It's they could care less about unity. It's about power and steamrolling over people. The idea that they're trying to carry this forward under the banner of unity is an insult to the American people. We've got to take a timeout. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I won't give up the ship.
Talking about what matters.
This country is too great to throw over to communism. I love it.
Here's Tom Lamprecht with more news and views on Talk 96.3 and 103.7.
Did you see earlier in the week, Amazon came out and said that in-person voting only is the way to ensure valid, fair union elections. Amazon is reportedly attempting to prohibit employees at an Alabama warehouse from participating in an upcoming unionized vote with mail-in ballots. Why? Because of the coronavirus pandemic, a significant portion of American voters participated in the 2020 election by casting mail-in ballots. In fact, data from the Pew Research Center found that nearly half of American voters, 46%, cast an absentee or mail-in ballot. Democrats pushed the mail-in ballots. So did Amazon. But when it comes to unionizing this warehouse in Alabama, Amazon has filed an appeal with the National Labor Relations Board over the agency's decision permitting nearly 6,000 employees who work inside Amazon's Alabama plant and Bessemer to participate in the unionized election through mail-in ballots. Instead, Amazon wants the election to be conducted in person. Amazon argued in one of two filings that the agency's pandemic voting policy is flawed, in part because it fails to define what a COVID-19 outbreak actually is. This is unbelievable. Oh. The same garbage they were peddling to overthrow the Trump administration and bring in the new dictator, Joe Biden. Everything that they said, why mail-in ballots were so wonderful for the presidential election, they're terrible for their unionized election. The starkness of the double standard of liberals really is mind-boggling. PJ Media has got a story out today. Christian scholar and author Robert Gagnon. He teaches at a seminary down in Houston, Texas. On Tuesday, Facebook suspended his Facebook account because he is speaking out against the transgender ideology of President Joe Biden for the military. Facebook claimed that Gagnon's criticism of this government-imposed ideology violated the platform's community standards on violence and incitement. Ironically, Gagnon's post drew attention to Facebook's suspension of his friend Lori Higgins. She got a 7-day ban. Quote, "There was absolutely no incitement to violence on our part. We abhor violence done to any person," Gagnon told PJ Media. "This is just a thinly veiled and pathetic excuse for censorship of any critical views towards trans tyranny over our consciences, religion, and reason. Only one point of view is being allowed. Trump was not the great danger to the republic. Left-wing canceling is." Gagnon, who holds a PhD in Pauline theology and sexuality from Princeton Theological Seminary, has published the Bible and Homosexual Practice, Texts and Hermeneutics. He teaches as a professor of the New Testament theology at Houston Baptist University. In the post Facebook flagged, Gagnon had defended his friend Higgins and her response to Biden's pro-transgender military policy. He got suspended basically for just defending Lori Higgins, who was suspended for 7 days. The post said, Biden's lifting of Trump's transgender military ban will indeed put women military personnel in the awful position of having to shower with biological males. 2, trans promoters aren't content with having men invade the domain of women's sports and shelters. 3, transgender ideology is indeed a pseudoscience compelling people to reject basic biological facts. 4, promoters of transgenderism do indeed exhibit traits of a religious cult in their mind-numbing, science-denying conformity. The censoring and suspending of Lori Higgins rather proves this point, doesn't it? For that, he was booted from Facebook, saying that it violated the community standards on violence and incitement. Well, I mean, they think Donald Trump incited the riot up in Washington, D.C., so, yeah, why wouldn't that Facebook? If that Facebook post incites a riot, then I don't think it's the Facebook post that ought to be blamed. I think it's the rioters. What do you think? But nonetheless, he's booted off Facebook. This really ought to energize you to find an alternative for Facebook and drop Facebook. Are we on, what are we on at now, Clark, besides?
So Monday, we were going to start MeWe.
MeWe. So we can drop Facebook.
Correct.
Okay. So go to MeWe starting on Monday. Now, of course, you can watch the show on our web page, too, newsandviewswithtom.com.
Yeah, and we'll have something up for them to actually see and go to.
But MeWe starting on Monday. The double standard, though, on this is rather mind-boggling. So this professor, who I just read what he posted, and that's what got him kicked off of Facebook because he's inciting a riot, violence. At the same time, the Daily Wire's got a story out. President Joe Biden, who attended Sunday Mass at Holy Trinity Roman Catholic Church in Washington, he's attended that church since his days as vice president. The media has just gone bonkers over how wonderful this is, that he is showing just a great compassion and a great president of faith, more than any other president in recent history. This is the same media that chastised the latest addition to the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett. Why? Because she was a radical Catholic. Same church, double standard. We got to run. We'll do it again tomorrow. See you then. Bye-bye, everybody.